The Block is Hot marks the official debut of Lil Wayne, released in 1999 when he was only 17 years old. Given his young age, and the fact that this is his first solo effort, it's completely understandable that his style isn't fully developed yet. What's immediately noticeable throughout the album is that Wayne heavily mirrors the sound and delivery of his Cash Money label mates. His tone, cadences, and subject matter often resemble that of Juvenile, BG, and Turk, which makes sense, considering he was coming up in the same environment and trying to find his footing. While this imitation doesn't always work in his favor, it occasionally results in solid moments that hint at his potential. One of the most consistent patterns across the album is the reliance on Cash Money's signature bounce-heavy production, courtesy of Mannie Fresh. While the beats are energetic and reflect the late 90s southern hip-hop sound, they sometimes feel too formulaic, especially when paired with lyrical content that lacks variety. Many tracks follow the same themes: guns, money, status, and street credibility, which causes the album to feel repetitive by the halfway point. Lil Wayne, still developing as a writer and performer, often falls into the trap of rapping about the same subjects with similar phrasing and structure. The collaborations with other Cash Money artists, while expected, don't always enhance the songs. In fact, most of the guest features feel like throwaways, as if they were included just to fill space, or keep the Cash Money brand front and center. However, there are a few exceptions where the chemistry works. The album's introduction, handled by the Big Timers, is energetic and does a decent job of setting the tone.
Got them po-pos pulling up acting crazy. Nigga, look out. The block is hot.
Songs like Enemy Turf and You Want War stand out as well. Thanks to strong guest verses from Juvenile and Turk, who complement Wayne effectively, these tracks feel more intentional, like the artists were truly collaborating rather than just trading verses. Despite the album's flaws, there are moments where Wayne's individuality begins to break through. One of the clearest examples is the track F the World. On this song, Wayne opens up emotionally about the loss of his father and the pain that came with it. His delivery on this track is heartfelt and vulnerable, offering a rare glimpse into his personal life. This song stands in stark contrast to the braggadocious tone of much of the album, and proves that Wayne had more to offer than the average gangster rap tropes. It's one of the most powerful and memorable songs on the project, and a clear indication of the emotional depth he would tap into more frequently in his later work.
A young nigga screaming fuck the world and let him die. Behind this, trying to dump the world and smoking ride.
Another track worth mentioning is the title track, The Block is Hot. While it doesn't reinvent the wheel, it's catchy, high energy, and effectively captures the spirit of early 2000s New Orleans rap. It's easy to see why this song resonated with fans and helped establish Wayne as a rising star. Ultimately, The Block is Hot feels more like a showcase of the Cash Money sound than a fully developed Lil Wayne project. The album lacks focus and originality in many places, with too many songs blending together due to repetitive production and one-dimensional subject matter. However, for a debut, it's not without its merits. Wayne shows flashes of emotional honesty, energy, and technical ability that point to the greatness he would achieve in the future. In conclusion, The Block is Hot isn't a great album in my opinion. It has too much filler, too little variety, and doesn't offer a clear artistic vision from Wayne himself. But there are some highlights here. Tracks like F the World and Enemy Turf show potential, and the overall energy of the project can still be enjoyable in the right mood. While it doesn't hold up strongly in his discography, this debut was a necessary step in Wayne's evolution into one of hip-hop's most iconic figures. Lights Out, Lil Wayne's sophomore album, represents a noticeable step forward in his artistic development. Released in 2000, just a year after his debut, The Block is Hot, this project showcases a young artist beginning to find his voice and grow more confident in his craft. Compared to his debut, Wayne delivers stronger performances, better lyricism, and more varied flows, signaling that he was slowly maturing into the rapper he later become. One of the most apparent improvements is Wayne's delivery. On Lights Out, his cadence and vocal control are sharper, and his bars are more thought out. There's a noticeable increase in the energy and conviction behind his rapping, as if he's starting to understand what it takes to carry an album. Songs like Beef highlight this shift particularly well. On that track, Wayne leans into a more aggressive bar-for-bar style that hints at the lyrical prowess he would later master. It's raw, hungry, and one of the clearest signs that his pen game was evolving.
Raining hammer cats with masses and plastic gats, storming through the house screaming, where's this bastard's crack?
Wayne also experiments with different flows throughout the project, which helps keep things fresh. A standout example is F With Me Now. where he adopts a more East Coast inspired cadence, stepping outside of the Southern bounce mold he was primarily known for. This attempt at stylistic versatility doesn't feel forced, rather it shows a young artist eager to expand his range and influence.
I go by way, sit the dawn. Magnificent nigga, lot of ice around my neck and freeze, sit the on.
It's moments like these that make Lights Out feel like a bridge between the early Cash Money sound and the more refined artist Wayne would later become. Another area of growth is Wayne's effort to introduce meaningful concepts into his music. Songs like Everything and Lil One show him moving beyond the repetitive topics that weighed down his debut. On Everything, Wayne touches on themes of loyalty, betrayal, and trust, while Lil One carries a more introspective tone.
Say, Lil One,
What's down with you, big dog?
look, I need to talk about some serious shit.
These tracks reveal a more thoughtful side of Wayne, proving that even at a young age, he was capable of addressing deeper subject matter when he chose to. However, Lights Out is far from a flawless album. One of its biggest weaknesses is the production, primarily handled by Mannie Fresh. While Mannie Fresh has a legendary catalog and was crucial to Cash Money's early success, many of the beats on this project veer too far into the experimental and cartoonish. Tracks like Acta Ass are bogged down by bizarre spacey sound effects that clash with Wayne's otherwise solid verses. Similarly, Get Off the Corner suffers from excessive drum patterns and cluttered percussion that overwhelms the track and distracts from Wayne's performance. This strange, overly playful production style becomes a recurring issue across the album. In many cases, the weird, over-the-top sonic palette detracts from the experience and ultimately lowers the replay value of several tracks. It's not that Wayne isn't delivering, he often is, but the production choices work against him instead of enhancing the music. That said, not all the beats are misses. There are several tracks where the production aligns well with Wayne's delivery and subject matter. These moments provide a glimpse of what Lights Out could have been if the soundscape had been more consistent. Tracks like Shine and Grown Man benefit from cleaner, more focused beats, and as a result, Wayne's performances on those tracks hit harder. In the end, Lights Out is a significant improvement over The Block Is Hot. Wayne sounds more confident, more experimental, and more willing to step out of his comfort zone. He's still figuring things out, and there are still rough edges, especially with the erratic production, but the growth is clear. The album may not be essential listening in the context of Wayne's full discography, but it plays an important role in his evolution as an artist. In conclusion, Lights Out is a flawed but promising sophomore effort. It shows Wayne beginning to carve out his identity while wrestling with inconsistent production. The highs are much higher than his debut, and the glimpses of his future greatness are there for those paying attention. It's a transitional project, more polished than the first, but still a few steps away from the brilliance he would later deliver. Lil Wayne's 500 Degrees, released in 2002, marks a noticeable setback in his artistic progression. Coming off the more promising Lights Out, this third studio album is weighed down by several flaws that ultimately keep it from standing out in his early catalog. While there are occasional bright spots, they're largely overshadowed by poor creative decisions, repetitive content, and a lack of cohesive direction. One of the most noticeable changes on this album is the production. Unlike his previous projects, where Mannie Fresh handled nearly all of the instrumentals, 500 Degrees introduces a new sonic influence, particularly with the inclusion of Jazze Pha. While Jazze Pha is a respected producer, known for his polished funk-infused beats, his style doesn't mesh well with Lil Wayne's voice or delivery. The production often feels overly glossy and somewhat disconnected from the gritty southern bounce that Wayne's fans had grown accustomed to. It's not that Jazze Pha's beats are bad on their own, but in the context of a Wayne album, they feel out of place and diminish Wayne's presence on several tracks. Another glaring issue with 500 Degrees is the excessive number of guest appearances. Rather than showcasing Wayne as a developing solo artist, this album often plays like a Cash Money compilation tape. Many tracks are flooded with verses from label mates or affiliates, to the point where Wayne feels like a secondary figure on his own project. This lack of focus dilutes the experience and makes it difficult for listeners to connect with Wayne directly. The overuse of features also suggests a lack of confidence in Wayne's ability to carry songs on his own at the time, which is unfortunate considering the glimpses of potential he showed on Lights Out. To make matters worse, Wayne repeatedly refers to himself as Birdman Jr. throughout the album, a nickname meant to reflect his close association with Birdman and Cash Money. However, its constant repetition quickly becomes tiring and feels more like a branding tactic than anything substantial. Rather than carving out his own identity, Wayne appears overly attached to the label's image image, which stifles the individuality he was beginning to build. Adding to the album's inconsistency are the numerous skits scattered throughout. These skits, which aim for humor or storytelling, end up feeling forced and unnecessary. They interrupt the flow of the album without adding much value or context, and ultimately contribute to a bloated and disjointed listening experience. Instead of enhancing the narrative or tone, they pull listeners out of the moment and feel like filler content. Despite all of these shortcomings, 500 Degrees isn't entirely without merit. There are moments where Wayne shows flashes of the growth and potential that fans hope to see. The album's intro track, Look at Me, is one of the stronger entries, as Wayne debuts a more refined and aggressive flow. His delivery is more confident, and it feels like he's eager to prove himself, even if the rest of the album doesn't support that same energy. Another highlight is The Way of Life, featuring Birdman and TQ. Despite Birdman's frequent presence across Wayne's early work, this track stands out due to its catchy hook, smooth production, and stronger than usual chemistry between the three artists. It's one of the few songs on the project that sounds complete and intentional. Perhaps the most emotionally resonant track is Young and Blues, a surprisingly heartfelt song in which Wayne reflects on two important women in his life. On this track, Wayne sheds the bravado and posturing in favor of genuine expression. The emotional maturity he displays here is a rare but refreshing moment that reminds listeners he's capable of introspection and vulnerability, qualities he would develop more fully in later years.
And all she ever wanted was for Young Weezy to love her, but all I ever wanted was to come easy and dumb.
In conclusion, 500 Degrees is a disappointing album that lacks the focus, cohesion, and growth fans were expecting from Lil Wayne at this point in his career. Between the mismatched production, unnecessary features, repetitive lyrics, and misplaced skits, the album feels unfocused and underwhelming. Still, the few high points, particularly Look at Me, The Way of Life, and Young and Blues, provide enough value to make the album worth exploring for dedicated fans. Ultimately though, this project feels like a misstep rather than a step forward. In conclusion, Lil Wayne's early discography reflects a young artist developing his sound while navigating the dominant Cash Money aesthetic. His debut album The Block Is Hot showcased raw energy but lacked originality. Wayne heavily mimicked his label mates' styles, and though there were standout moments like F the World, the album suffered from repetitive subject matter and filler tracks. His second album, Lights Out, marked a noticeable improvement. Wayne began experimenting with new flows, showed greater lyrical confidence, and introduced more conceptual tracks like Everything and Grown Man. However, the project was held back by Mannie Fresh's overly experimental and cartoonish production, which at times overshadowed Wayne's performance. 500 Degrees, his third effort, was a step backward. The album struggled with identity issues, thanks to an overwhelming number of features, intrusive skits, and production that didn't suit Wayne's style, particularly from Jazze Pha. Wayne's constant repetition of the phrase Birdman Jr. and lack of solo focus made the album feel more like a Cash Money group project than a true solo effort. Still, songs like Look at Me, Young and Blues, and The Way of Life offer glimpses of his artistic growth. Overall, while each of these albums has a few strong highlights, they reflect Wayne's transitional period as he searched for his own voice amid heavy label influence and inconsistent production.